Prospector News is media for educational purposes only and should not be construed as advice. We are not a certified financial analyst, licensed broker, or fund dealer, exempt market dealer, or hold a license to provide financial advice. We provide no legal opinion regarding accounting, tax, or law issues. Nothing in this podcast should be construed as investment advice or the solicitation to buy or sell stocks or commodities. All opinions expressed are those of the participants and should not be relied upon when making investment decisions. Those decisions should be made with the advice of a personal financial advisor. If you have enjoyed our podcast, please hit the like and share buttons and be sure to hit subscribe. I'm Michael Fox, and this is the Prospector News Podcast. And joining me, I have friend and guest Ryan Sistad from Better in Our Backyard. Welcome, Ryan.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for having me.
Yes, it's good to have you back. There's been some developments up with the PolyMet situation there in northern Minnesota. Can you bring us up to date on what's happened there?
Yeah, so there's been some exciting new developments. A company called Teck, or a Canadian company back in your backyard called Teck, agreed to a joint venture with PolyMet to form a new LLC called New Range Copper Nickel, and this joint venture is a huge and positive step forward for PolyMet's NorthMet project. It's been going through the permitting process for the last 17 years, and basically what Teck and PolyMet are doing are combining their resources and their expertise to make sure that this is a successful project for Northeast Minnesota and for the country.
Now, Teck has a mine in that region currently. Is that correct, or is it a former mine?
Technically, they don't have a mine, but they've had a presence in Minnesota for quite a while now. They've been looking to potentially develop a project nearby a deposit that they call the Mesaba deposit. And it's more than, from what I understand anyway, it's more than double the size of the NorthMet deposit. But to your point earlier, technically Teck doesn't have a mine, but PolyMet has been trying to basically redevelop an old iron mine. They're reusing an existing iron mine, actually, old site. And technically they call that a brownfield redevelopment site. But with Teck, that portion, that'd be a brand new mine.
Okay. And so Teck has a lot of permitting expertise in that area.
Yes, but also, PolyMet does as well. I mean, they've been, the permitting process is a tough one in Minnesota. I mean, I think, when you look to other countries like Canada or Australia, the average timeline to permit a mine is 2 to 3 years. And in the US, it's roughly 10 years, but here in Minnesota, it's taken, over 17 years. PolyMet began at 17 years ago, and they're still technically going through the permitting process and litigation. So it's the go that long in the permitting process, you have to face some curveballs, and that's where PolyMet has a very unique expertise in that field that's way over my head. So
yeah, that's always a challenge when things don't go smoothly. You become you become a bit of a savant in dealing with the unexpected.
Yeah. Yep. And that's certainly Minnesota.
Wonderful. What challenges have been created for this project from a permitting standpoint?
Oh, just the main thing lately has just been lawsuits. I mean, technically PolyMet was fully permitted back in March of 2019. They got all their permits, and after about 14 or 15 years of going through the permitting process, and since then it's just been facing lawsuits and appeals of various permits right now, and that lately that's been the challenge for PolyMet.
I see. And how long of a runway can that create in the state of Minnesota?
Oof, I have no clue. I think it's all dependent on how, the lawsuits progress, and how quickly the courts make a decision is basically what we're kind of, handicapped to, if you will. I mean, you just basically wait on decisions, essentially.
Yeah,
And that's
as
it. I really can't say. I mean, that's the thing, Michael. I think that's the frustrating thing overall, about the permitting process in Minnesota, about, permitting a new mine. It's just, it's tough to know. Like Twin Metals, for example, they submitted their mine plan of operations, and, the state agencies in Minnesota, they had that mine plan of operations, I believe, for over a year, and they didn't even get to reviewing it yet, their mine plan, before our current administration stripped their leases away. So it's just, Minnesota's tough. It's tough, but I think it's getting better, and especially, once we see New Range Copper Nickels North Met project become a success. To your question before of what kind of runway does this look like, I think this will be a lot clearer once we see the North Met project up and running responsibly.
well, that's definitely good news. As Tom Petty always says, the waiting's the hardest part. So
Yeah.
now with the Biden administration and its move towards critical minerals, nickel is part of that. Does that help speed up the process there, or is states' rights taking hold, and they can still go at the same pace, even though it's a national issue?
Well, obviously we hope that it speeds up that process, but I think part of the problem, or at least in my opinion, part of the problem is that as much as we applaud the administration for making a point of pushing for renewables and EVs, and lately they've been talking more about how we need to source these minerals domestically. The problem is that it's very rare that they actually name a specific project. In the past, they've done a good job of mentioning Talon Metals project out of Tamarack, Minnesota, as a good prospect to be a good responsible supplier of nickel here in the US. So they have mentioned specific projects in the past, but the problem is that, in my opinion, they're not going far enough. They can't just say we want to get more domestic minerals here at home without naming specific projects. Whether it's in Minnesota, or whether it's in Idaho, or whether it's a project up in Alaska, because at this point, like, as long as they're, because basically their goal is to either source minerals here domestically, or get it, or trade with our allies like Canada or Australia, where responsible mining is being done, which I'm a fan of. But at this point, until they start naming specific projects here in the US, they're just, they're basically creating more of a demand for Canadian jobs and Australian jobs, essentially mining jobs, in my opinion. I might be looking at this wrong, but so that's where it's a little, I think, frustrating for many in the region, is that as much as we love hearing the current administration talk about how they want to source our minerals here at home and domestically, in my opinion, I think they need to get a little bit more aggressive and start naming good potential prospects like New Range Copper Nickels North Met project. I maybe this is a bad analogy, but I was thinking about this the other day. It's kind of like if an architect were to come up to you, Michael, and say, "Hey, you know what? We're going to build your dream home. We're going to build you with 3 bedrooms, 3 baths, a great porch. It's going to be on a lake. You're going to have a 5-acre backyard. It's going to be the perfect home." And you say, "Great, where are the plans?" "Well, we don't have a blueprint. We don't have a plan." You're going to laugh them out of your room. And that's kind of what the administration is doing a little bit, is they're talking about these ideas, which are good, but they're not really coming up with a good solid plan about, okay, this is where we can get our nickel from. We can get it from Minnesota. These are the projects, and then we can also get it to our friends in Canada and Australia. And the same with copper. And we're not hearing that very often. And then another thing too, we need to start talking about more is increasing our refining capacity here in the US as well. But that's just kind of where it is. But overall, I have to applaud the administration for talking about increasing, our domestic supply of minerals. But I think they need to take it one more step. I think they need to start naming projects more often, and cheering on projects from a distance, so that our state agencies here in Minnesota take notice.
I couldn't agree with you more. Although I was, as a Canadian, I was buoyed when I saw it, and is it still called Build Back Better? The latest infrastructure bill, when they talked about the grants for electric vehicles, Included in the language now is exactly that you could get metals from free trading allies, as opposed to before, where that wasn't part of the equation in order to get grant funding to purchase these vehicles in the United States. So as a Canadian, I was buoyed by that, but I certainly don't disagree. I think they lack a plan on how to get there, but in fairness, so does the Canadian government. It's like, unicorn pee and fairy farts, and we're gonna have a green economy. It's, government seems to be very big on talking about grand ideas, but they don't seem to have much of a plan on how to get there. So much for me on my soapbox. As we did our last podcast, I want to address some comments that came through Twitter by someone who clearly listened to the podcast. I wanted to respond to their concerns on Twitter, but due to the nature of the social media, it's challenging. It's only 140 characters, and as much as I tried, I couldn't get my thoughts across without sounding condescending. And I really didn't want to be, because the person was being quite sincere in what they were asking about. The question and the point that they were making is they felt that when it came to nickel production, we could simply recycle our way out of the problem. And there are numerous challenges with that. And I'm not saying that recycling is not part of the solution. It certainly is. Nickel is actually a very recyclable material. It holds up very well. Generally, if there's 10 grams of nickel in an item, we can get those 10 grams of nickel right back out of it when it's recycled. But one of the first challenges is that there's simply not enough material to recycle to meet the world demand. So we're still going to need mines, and again, to your organization, better in our backyard rather than overseas, where we have questionable partners in, say, Russia, Indonesia, South Africa, where things are always a little more on the dicier side. And those, apart from Canada and Australia, those are the other three major nickel producers in the world. Now, 2/3 of nickel production goes into the making of stainless steel. So one would assume that stainless steel would be the main stock item for recycling, and it is. There is a challenge because you have to separate the nickel from the steel in the stainless steel. That requires a 70% nitric acid solution in order to do that. Now, nitric acid has its challenges. When mixed with oxygen, it forms nitrous oxide, which is in fact a greenhouse gas, and one that is considered to be 300 times more destructive than CO2. It is also an ozone depleter, which is not good for the planet. And in the 60s and 70s, it was also a key contributor to the acid rain problem that we had solved there. So although recycling needs to be part of the solution, I think we need to find better methods to recycle the nickel than using nitric acid, which is a challenge for engineers going forward. As it sits currently, I think it's a situation where it's choose your poison. But with that said, 68% of stainless steel is made from recycled materials. So we are making progress in those areas. Your thoughts, Ryan? How would a nickel recycling plant go in Minnesota?
I think it would go just fine. I mean, I think anytime you try to permit a new project in Minnesota, you're gonna have your difficulties. And but from my perspective, and I'm not speaking for any other mining company or but at least for me, I mean, it's kind of similar to how I take the energy approach here in the country. Is it's an all above the energy approach, whether it's natural gas or renewables and vice versa. The same goes with minerals. there's a demand that we have to meet. It's going to take a lot of mining, but recycling is a component to that as well, to your point. And, but it's going to have to take a good combo of the two, and all above the approach, both responsible recycling of materials and responsible mining.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And I think advances in technology is going to be another big contributor. There's a company that I work called BackTech Environmental, and they're a bioleaching company. What they use is bacteria to break down rocks to separate the minerals out from the rocks. And in the Sudbury Nickel Belt, they're running a trial. Currently, they're setting it up. It'll be in operation in early 2023 if everything goes the way that they hope to, for a pilot trial. And what will happen is that they're going to be able to separate the nickel and the steel out of an element called pyrrhotite, which is a tailings waste that comes from nickel mining. Pyrrhotite is a very volatile material, so much so it has to be stored underwater, otherwise it will combust. Not good. So when they're successful in proving that the technology's already proven that they can do it, when they're successful at proving that to be a commercially viable option, I see that as helping PolyMet and Teck there in Minnesota deal with some of the environmental issues concerning the tailings that are going to come out of those mines.
Yeah, I'd have to do more research in that type of technologies, but that's certainly an interesting prospect.
But yeah, as I say, technology is going to have to be, I think, part of these solutions as well, because we can't continue on with what we're doing and the way we're doing it, because as I pointed out with the recycling process, it's still damaging to the environment.
Yeah. I have to think more on that.
Yeah, unfortunately, some of these problems aren't as black and white of a solution than as we would maybe like them to be. So
yeah, Michael,
so going forward into the rest of the year, what's expected to occur up there?
I can't speak specifically on the projects that we're advocating for, because you never know what's going to develop, and hopefully, between now and the end of the year, everything is positive. But I know from an organizational standpoint, earlier this summer we did a tour of PolyMet. We did an event for Better in Our Backyard, and we had over 100 people show up for the tour and 150 people show up for the networking portion. In a couple of weeks, we're going to do a Twin Metals tour. And the theme of that event is going to be talking about mining and the clean energy transition, and how responsible mining can play a huge role in supplying the minerals needed for a renewable energy future. And Twin Metals certainly fits that bill down the road. And we're hoping they get 100+ people there as well, up in Ely. That should be a fun time. I know, for Better in Our Backyard members, we're doing a golf event on Monday, September 19th. That event sold out within a week of promoting it, which I didn't expect, because I think we started promoting it during the 4th of July holiday week. So it's kind of a tough week to do, because it seems like half the people that you work with are on vacation, but we sold out pretty quickly. And then after that, we're going to hopefully do another another networking event, maybe mid-fall sometime, before the holidays hit. And then after that, we'll be planning for our next winter dinner in January, late January. And usually that's a good turnout too. Earlier this year, we did a winter dinner and we had over 240 people show up, and hoping to repeat that same success next year, and maybe hopefully get a couple cool keynote speakers involved as well, where it's a good networking opportunity, but also educational from both a mining and energy perspective.
Yeah, that's the key, I think, is we have to, win the hearts and minds over person by person.
That's right. Yeah. And we're working on it. It takes time, but I think we're getting there. I think as long as, folks like you and me work together on painting mining in a more positive light and sharing those good stories and how they put food on the table for many in Canada and many in Minnesota, I think the more that we can gain traction and support for for mining in general.
Definitely. Thank you very much for joining me, and I look forward to circling back to you in the coming months as events warrant and we hear more good news coming out of Minnesota.
Sounds great, Michael. I appreciate you having me on again. Always a pleasure.
You bet. Thank you.